Hello everyone, my name is Marc Sabatella with Mastering MuseScore, and welcome to the MuseScore Café. So for those who are new, welcome. For those of you who are not new, welcome back. This is my regular series of I do every Wednesday where I talk about some aspect of making music with MuseScore and show you some stuff, answer some questions, and generally have a good time. This is, as always, is brought to you by the Mastering MuseScore School. I have the link posted up in the top of the chat, so by all means check it out. Check out the complete online course I offer for MuseScore, as well as my theory courses, etc. So, the topic that I picked to talk about today has to do with workspaces, which is a kind of a broad term, but one with a specific meaning in MuseScore. So I'm going to talk about that, but I do see there's kind of an unrelated question in here about playback. My guess is you are using a non-default sound font or something. You have changed a setting somewhere that is causing the dynamics not to be respected. Probably you're using an instrument that supports single note dynamics, but a sound font that doesn't, or vice versa. So best to go to the official support forum on MuseScore.com. On MuseScore.org. Sorry, go to the official support forum and ask your question there and attach the score you're having a problem with. Then someone can show you where things went wrong. But normally dynamics just work out of the box. So usually if they don't, it's an indication that you've changed something from the default, and then it's just a question of figuring out what you've changed. So, am I live? I'm definitely live on my phone. I was just, a minute or two late getting started, which is pretty common. So I'm thinking I'm live. You might want to confirm that you see it, but I'm seeing it here on my phone, so I'm pretty sure I'm live. Yes, workspaces. When you first start MuseScore, in fact, I deliberately put myself in the default basic workspace, so it would look like what your computer probably looks like when you first start MuseScore, more or less, if you haven't changed anything. So the workspaces, thanks for the confirmation that I'm live, by the way. The control that we're going to be dealing with here is up in the upper right hand corner. You'll see a drop down menu, and by default the only options you're going to see are basic and advanced, and the difference between them is not as significant as it was when we first introduced the workspace concept, and I'll show you why. For instance, on the basic palette, these are the only clefs you get: treble clef, bass clef, and alto and tenor clef, right? And if you go to, let's see, time signatures, time signatures got a bunch, but articulations, there's only a small handful of articulations, because we think most musicians really only need these. But, if you do have a need for a clef other than the big four, there's the More button, and that shows you all the rest of the clefs, right? And if you want an articulation other than the kind of main 7 that we're showing you here, the More button there lets you see all the others. And not only that, okay, so this is the basic workspace, but not only that, if you decide there's one of these you use a lot, like maybe you're a string player or you're writing for strings, and therefore you want the bow markings to be in the main part of the palette. Well, just drag it there. And now you've got the bow markings in the main part of your palette. So you can start with the basic palette and just add things to it as necessary. And I think, frankly, had that feature existed when I first started using MuseScore, that's probably how I would have done things. I would have started with the basic workspace and then just added a few things to it. But realistically, it didn't used to be that easy to customize your workspaces, and so to customize palettes in particular. And so I was in the habit of starting with the advanced palette and putting up with the advanced workspace, which I'll show you in a moment, and putting up with the fact that half the stuff in there I'm never ever going to use. So, but either way works. So notice now that I've made those changes. If I look at the workspace here, it now says basic edited because I've edited it. It's no longer the default basic workspace. It's got those extra things. So there's a couple things. If I want to get back to the original, there's a couple things that I can do. I can just go to that palette and click those little three dots there and say reset palette. And do I want to restore it to its default? Yes, I do. And now it's back to just the original 7. However, when I do that, apparently that is not enough for that's not enough for it to think that I haven't edited this workspace. I have edited it. I just changed it back also. If I want to really get back to a completely clean state, I'm going to go to View, Workspaces, Reset Workspace. Now it's going to set me back to, it's going to undo all the changes that I made, and my workspace just says basic. So the basic workspace is really fine for a lot of purposes. I mean, we definitely put some thought into what should go into it, what we thought most people would want. And now that the More button lets you get to everything else, it really is kind of fine for a lot of purposes. You can just maybe add a few things to it. However, there's also the advanced workspace that MuseScore comes with. And also pay attention to the toolbar. So I've been focusing on the palettes. But in the toolbar, notice that the basic workspace has note durations starting with a 30-second note going up to a whole note. There's no faster note values than 30-second. There's no longer note values than whole note. Also, it's got a dot, but no double dot, no triple dot, no quadruple dot. I don't recommend any of those things. That's why they're not in the basic workspace. But in any case, just notice that that's the case. When I switch to the advanced workspace, which takes a moment, you'll see that I now have 128th notes, 64th notes, and I've got double whole notes, also known as brevs, and a longa, which is twice as long as that even. And I've got double dots, triple dots, quadruple dots. And if I now open my articulations palette, it's not just 7 things on it, it's like everything. So the advanced workspace is where a lot of people spend their time. Now, I see a question about scrolling the palette, and this seems to be an issue on some systems and not on others. So this system I'm on does not have this issue currently, but I have been on systems where it does, and there's a couple things that I can talk about that will kind of help with this. Like for me, my scrolling works pretty smoothly in the palette, but I recognize there are some systems in which for whatever reason it doesn't work as smoothly in here. You might find that it kind of overshoots what you're doing and then bounces back. The implementation of the scrolling it just works different on different systems. So one thing that I personally might recommend is in the top of your palettes, in the top of the palettes window, you'll see 3 dots here, and first go with collapse all palettes, just to collapse them all. Then say open only one palette at a time. If you do that, you pretty much will never have to scroll. If I'm working on key signatures, I'll add some key signatures, and now if I'm ready to add some articulations, it's going to automatically close the key signatures palette so that there's only one palette at a time open. So if you can kind of adjust your thinking and workflow to a world in which that might make sense, and I'm going to talk about more how to make that work for you better, it will largely eliminate the need to scroll. You can also, by the way, totally get rid of palettes. Like I notice, like it used to be the case that the advanced workspace, if I click the Add Palettes button here, you'll see there's 2 palettes, accordion and bagpipe embellishments that MuseScore comes with that we don't even bother to put in the advanced workspace because they're so specialized. So that's probably good for most people. But if you're someone who just knows you're never going to use fingering, well, you can just delete that palette. Click those 3 dots and actually, maybe I just click the palette and press delete. I'm going to do that. Click the palette and then press delete, and now the fingering palette's gone. Oops, I deleted the wrong palette. Oh no, what am I going to do? I must have deleted the Dynamics palette instead. I can go back to Add Palettes, and there it is. When I deleted it, it didn't go away permanently. It just went away temporarily. And so now I can add it back, and it added up to the top. I can then drag it back where it belongs, which I think was right above fingering. To be honest, I don't remember. Might have been below fingering. So at this point, I'm just going to go back to View, Workspaces, Reset Workspace, and kind of fix that. There's a question about having multiple computers and sharing the workspace. So the workspace file gets saved. It's an XML file that gets saved in some special folder in some location that kind of depends on your operating system. Like for me on Linux, I have to think about where it is. I think it might be config. If I find it here, then I can tell you where it is on Windows. No, it's not there. See, that's the thing is I can never remember where these special folders are. Unfortunately, it's I just can never. I can never remember this stuff because I keep moving from system to system and so forth. But somewhere or other, there is a special folder where that workspace file lives, and then you can just copy it from one computer to another. So that's something that you might consider doing. I wish I could remember where it was on Linux because that's I swear I forget every single time I go to do this. No, not that. Yeah, I just can't remember. So in any case, maybe someone else can figure out the answer. But anyhow, once you find that file, I think if you look in the handbook and look under like the instructions in the handbook on recovering a backup file, or also on reverting to factory settings, you'll see a discussion of where MuseScore keeps some of these special hidden files, and you'll be able to find it. So sorry I don't off the hand remember where they are even on Linux, but wherever on Windows it's probably like app data. It's probably under app data under your home folder. But yeah, it's all operating system dependent. So, but yeah, I do that. I do share my workspaces between them. Every once in a while, I'll copy them. My main computer, though, has all my most recent changes. And so, like, I just made one customization in my workspace yesterday that now won't be on my Windows computer when I go over to that. So, I talk about customizations to my workspaces. I generally keep my basic and my advanced workspaces. Yeah, look at that. It moved to the bottom of the list. That's interesting. I think when I restart MuseScore, it'll move back up to the top. You'll notice that I have a bunch of workspaces here. Well, you can create your own. So what you do is you pick which workspace you want to start with, either basic or advanced. Like I might start with basic because, like I said, I think that's actually pretty smart. And then you can hit the plus button here to create a new workspace. And when you do this, my new workspace, because why not? When you create a new workspace, you now have a new workspace and you can make all the changes you want. You can reset them, and you never have to worry about messing up your basic or advanced workspaces. You can play with them all you want. Now, when you go to create the workspace, by default, the only thing that it will remember is changes to the palette. But I recommend, well, it totally depends on your purpose, but for my purposes, I typically also want to customize these three things. I want to customize my toolbars, I want to customize my GUI preferences, and my GUI components. So let me tell you what those things are. Toolbars is things like this. So the basic workspace is actually pretty nice. Except realistically, even though I don't particularly recommend the use of double dots, sometimes you need them. So I would want double dots added here. I would probably, because I do a lot of Renaissance music, I would want the brev here, even though frankly I never use the note input toolbar. I'm using keyboard shortcuts, but still it's comforting to see it. So I would probably want to add the brev there. So I would customize a couple things about my toolbars. GUI preferences are things like font size, right? If you want to make the icons bigger or the font bigger or smaller for MuseScore itself, not for the score, but for the actual palettes and the actual icons and the inspector. Those settings are things that you can customize, but if you want those settings to only be in one particular workspace, then you set that checkbox, and now that means those changes will only apply to this workspace. GUI components is things like is the mixer already open when you go to that workspace. So anyhow, for my purposes, I typically have all three of those checkboxes. Do not check the menu bar checkbox. That allows you to, in principle, customize the menu, but we don't provide a way to do it. You'd have to manually edit an XML file, and what ends up happening is then an update to MuseScore comes along and we add new menu items and you don't see them because you've got some customized workspace. So I do not recommend checking that box. So the other three check boxes, though, are good to check, and then when you say save, you will then have a new workspace called My New Workspace. And this workspace is based on the basic workspace, but now you can customize it to have just the things you want in it. So let me just take a quick look here. Does Workspace go with a score file? No. No, it does. No, definitely not. Nor is that the point. The only thing that goes that is sort of Workspace E that is part of your score is whether you're in page view or continuous view. Like right now, I'm viewing this in page view, so I can see individual pages. However, if I change to continuous view, so that now it's just one big long strip, that does get saved as part of the score. But your workspace definitely doesn't, nor would you want it to if you're using workspaces the way they're intended to be used. If you're using the workspace the way it's intended to be used, when you're working in that workspace, now you can load multiple scores there and they're all in that workspace. So I want to give you a really quick dramatic example here of a workspace I use all the time. I have one I call Presentation. Some of you have seen this before. Certainly, if you take any of my theory courses online, you've seen it. My presentation workspace, it actually remembered that I would have the play panel open the last time I was in here. I'll close that. But my presentation workspace has a number of things different. You'll notice it completely eliminated all the toolbars. I just got rid of all the toolbars because this is the workspace I use when I'm doing a theory presentation or some sort of presentation where I'm not talking about MuseScore, but I'm talking about music. So if I'm not trying to edit a score, I'm just trying to present things, I use this workspace. And so I get rid of all those toolbars because I don't need them. The only toolbar I keep is one relating to playback so that I can still do things like turn loop playback on and off or do image capture. Those are basically the only things, and toggle concert pitch. Those are about the only things I find myself needing to do in presentation mode. The other thing I need to do in presentation mode is switch back to the regular mode. So I have that control here. Realistically, I could have gotten rid of that. I could have gotten rid of this entire side panel and then said, oh, when I want to switch back, I can go to View Workspaces to switch to another workspace. But as it is, this didn't bother me because, as you know also, I always have my picture down here in the lower right when I'm doing these videos. So this space was essentially going to be wasted anyhow. I wasn't going to have my score go all the way to the right edge of the screen. So when I'm doing one of my theory classes, I will go, here's one of my handouts that's for the counterpoint course that I'm working on right now. I will view it, like right now it's viewed in the zoom to fill the window. I actually prefer doing it in like just life size there, so it's not quite so wide, and then I can see a little more vertically. And notice that right now it's scrolled horizontally. I really want it scrolled vertically. And in fact, I set it that way. This workspace has the setting so that pages will scroll vertically. However, because when I loaded the score, it didn't, it was set up the other way, I'm not going to see that. So let me close this score, and I'm just going to open that score again. Well, I'll open a different one because it's handy. So this one is now scrolls vertically because that is what this workspace is set to do. This workspace is set to scroll vertically. So those are the sort of settings that can be different between workspaces. So I'll show you what some other of those settings are in a moment. But so my presentation workspace is really nice if I'm more interested in talking about fugues than I am about MuseScore, which is, the case when I'm actually doing some of the the recorded lessons for my courses. In the cafe, of course, I'm always talking about MuseScore. In the music masterclass that I do on Thursdays, in principle, I'm talking about the music, but the reality is I'm doing enough playing with people's scores, adding things, changing things, that I still want to see the other stuff. So I don't tend to use this presentation workspace in the music masterclass, but I probably have on occasion. All right, so now I'm going to talk about toolbars. I see a comment about images. Well, yeah, images are part of your score. So anything that's part of your score saves with the score. Workspaces are not about your score. It's about the MuseScore user interface. So in other words, it's the things you see even when no score at all is loaded. That is your workspace. Anything that you only see when you're looking at a score is your score. Anything that is what you see with no score loaded, that is about your workspace. So apparently I just lost my MuseScore Café theme song. It's not anymore in my recent files list. Isn't that interesting? Oh, there it is. Okay, I just didn't see it. So I'm going to switch back from my presentation mode to a workspace that I'll just go back to the one I just created, my new workspace, and show you a couple other things, because there was a question about toolbars. And yeah, toolbars are definitely part of this, and I want to talk about that. But I do also see a question about my book. Unfortunately, the physical book that I created for MuseScore 2, MuseScore 2's idea of workspaces was very, very limited. So at the very end of the book, there's a chapter on customization, and it says a couple things about what you can do, but it's a fraction of what you can do today. So my online course, though, definitely the online course, the last section on customization, absolutely goes into much more detail. But yeah, what I'm showing you here it'll probably cover most of what's in the course. Maybe not all of it, but I'll probably touch on most of it. So let's talk about these toolbars. First of all, if I ever decided I just didn't want one of these toolbars, I can just right-click in this area here and say, here are all the toolbars, and I can say actually the toolbars are the ones on the bottom. The top ones are the windows. So when there was a checkbox for GUI components and I said it was things like the mixer, this is where you might be able to select which ones are actually displayed, but you can also do that in the view menu. But when I right click on the toolbar, you'll see I've got all the toolbars turned on except feedback. Well, let's turn on feedback. Now I've got a feedback toolbar. But look at that. It's like taking up a whole row to itself. I don't want that. So what I can do is drag this toolbar. I have to find the magic drag point, which sometimes is hard to find. And in this case, I don't even know where. I think the thing is with this toolbar is we abandoned it long enough ago that I don't know if there's a way to do that one. So anyhow, I'm gonna make that one go away because we don't use that one anymore, I don't think. But I'm gonna drag one of my other toolbars. Like, what if I look at this top toolbar here and say, you know what? This concert pitch button maybe I'd rather have it down here. So the concert pitch is like its own toolbar. Notice that my cursor just changed from the arrow to the hand. It might look different on your system because the actual icons depend on your operating system. So I can drag the concert pitch toolbar down here. Sense, because these buttons up here don't change your score. They just, do things with it. Concert pitch changes your score in a way, right? It changes the transposition of it. So really the concert pitch button belongs down here. I've never really thought about that before, but yeah. Anyhow, I should think about doing that. Did I lose my my screen share? It sure looks like it. So I'm glad I have that thing open so I can flip back to where I have that and get my screen share back, because that's no good. All right, so the question is, how much did we all miss? It should be okay now. So what did we all miss? Hopefully not too much. You'll have to let me know in the chat when it catches up, because I know I'm a few seconds behind. So what I just did was dragged the concert pitch down to the next level. I could do the same with the playback toolbar. I could drag that off to the side. I could drag it over here. And now it's over here. Or I can drag it below. Now it's below. Or I can drag it all the way to the side. Now it's on the side, right? So anyhow, that you can drag the toolbars around to kind of rearrange where they are, and that's what I did in my presentation one. You can see my presentation one. My presentation workspace had the playback toolbar and the concert pitch toolbar here on the side, as well as actually the workspace control bar itself, or toolbar itself. These toolbar, this is really three separate toolbars here: the workspace toolbar, the concert pitch toolbar, and the playback toolbar. I think the image capture toolbar, these are all separate toolbars actually. So I'm going to go back to my own little new fun workspace, and so I've fiddled around with some stuff. Now that I did that, this camera icon's in a funny place, so let me drag it over here. So Bob, you had a question about making things you had a question about making things more than one row, and so this is part of that answer, dragging things between these rows here, but I'll show you more stuff to do. I'm looking here at questions that I've lost in the chat, and so yeah. See, the thing is, I'm probably not going to update my book, because the moment you put out a book, it's outdated the next day. The next update, it's out of date, and everyone who bought the thing is outdated. The course is easy for me to update. I can update the course, and everyone automatically gets those updates. So I'm probably done with producing separate books. On the other hand, the handbook that comes with MuseScore, if you just go to Help, Online Handbook, that's constantly updated. So we're going to keep that updated, and my online courses will continue to be updated. Probably not the book. So Dave's still asking about images, and yes, they're saved to your score. Your score, the MSZ file, contains the image. It's got a copy of the image within that file. An MSZ file is basically a zip file that contains the actual score information, and which is MSCX, as well as your image. So yeah, images are stored in your score. So I see Peter has a question about moving pallets from one workspace to another, and yes, that's possible. Now my room just went dark, but that's just because my light's on a timer. What you can do, like if you have your own special version of a palette that you've customized, and I'll talk about adding entirely new palettes also if someone reminds me in a minute. If I click the three dots there by the lines palette, you'll see Save Palette. And when I do that, it lets me save a palette. And you save it to, you give it a file name, you pick a folder where you want to save it, just like any other file. Then when you go to the other workspace, you can do the same thing basically to load a palette. To load the palette, you just actually, I think if you go to the add palettes there, there's no load in there. That's kind of curious. I would have expected that. But anyhow, if I right click somewhere within the palettes, you'll see load palette again. So that's how you can load. That's how you can basically transfer palettes from one workspace to another. So that's one thing. So what if you want to customize what's on the toolbar? Like I mentioned, I want double dots on here maybe, or I want a brev. So I can go to View, Toolbars, Customize Toolbars. And in here, you'll see the comments. So the Node Input toolbar right now has augmentation dot, but doesn't have the double dot. Here's what's available to be added. So I can click double augmentation dot and click the little arrow over there to move it over. Ooh, and it didn't go where I wanted it to go, so I guess I use these arrows to kind of rearrange in here. Similarly, I can click the double whole note and send it over there. So now when I hit OK, now I have my double dot and my double whole note. So that's how you can customize what's actually on each of those toolbars. Now, when it came to palettes, I showed you about adding things to palettes, right? And I went to like the More section here of the Lines palette and said, hey, look, there's some things that I might want that aren't part of the default workspace. Let me add them. Let me add this staff text line here. This is basically line with text on it that's attached to a particular staff. And so you can use this for all sorts of purposes. I use it in some of my handouts. I think I probably did that in the handout I was just looking at. If I open that handout that said form, I think I have, nope, that's not a staff. Oh, that's not, that one doesn't, I guess this one doesn't have it because this isn't the same one I was looking at before. But in any case, if I add a staff line, it's just a line with some text on it, and then you can customize the text in the inspector. So that's what that thing is about, and so maybe you want that on there. So yeah, you can easily just drag things from that More section into a palette. You can also, at any time, press Z to display all the symbols in MuseScore. And when I say all, I mean there are thousands of symbols. Most of these are just symbols. They have no meaning in MuseScore. MuseScore doesn't know how to interpret them. It doesn't know anything special about how to position them, but there's just gobs and gobs and gobs of them. So for instance, I know someone was asking recently about glasses. There's the symbol for glasses, and now you can drag that into your palette. Now, why did I drag it into the Lines palette? Because I didn't have a better place to add it. I don't have a place for that, really. Well, if you want to have one, click Add Palettes, and now create custom palettes, and now this is my symbols. And now I can move the glasses into there. And when you do that, it actually makes a copy. So I can now right-click that one and delete it to remove it from the Lines palette because I don't really need it in the Lines palette. So you can add things from the Symbols palette. And now you can add it to your score really easily. Let me just go to a blank score because now I'm afraid of messing up one of my nice handouts. I can just click a note and click the glasses, and now the glasses are there. Right? So it doesn't know how to position them, so now I can, double click it and use the arrow keys or drag or however you like to position things, use the inspector, etc. So you can add symbols that way. Not just those kinds of symbols. You can also add text symbols. So let me show you what this is like. Text. If I press F2 right now, oh, I don't have my my keyboard thing going. All right. So when I pressed F2, this dialog showed up while editing text. And it's got all of these special characters, including, if I go to musical symbols, you'll see all those same symbols that were there before. Glasses are in here somewhere, probably under miscellaneous symbols. Yeah, there's those glasses. But you'll see there's all these other special things, percussion playing techniques and Renaissance lute tablature and all these different types of symbols that you can use. And so, like, if there's some particular symbol, harp techniques are in here. If I know, I don't know if Deb's here right now, but I know she's here sometimes. If you think you might want this little symbol there, which I don't know what that is, Retune Strings for glissando. All right, there we go. The Retune Strings for glissando symbol is now there in that text element. And because it's text, I can then make it bigger, which is kind of nice. You can't do that with ordinary symbols. So sometimes it's useful to add something as text rather than as a symbol, so you can control its size. So now I can drag it from my score. I'm using Shift Control Drag to add it from my score into that palette. So that's something else you can do. Lots of things you can do involving palette customization, and actually I've done a whole thing, a whole cafe just on that. So yeah, you can totally do that. Just customize palettes lots of ways. So look up the older episodes on palette customization. You'll find more things. I see also a question on getting rid of things that you'll never use. And yes, absolutely. If you think you're never going to use DC all by itself, which I absolutely think you should never use DC all by itself, because people are just going to wonder what to do once they get there. It should always be DC Alfine, DC Alcoda. So I'm never going to use that. So I'm going to right click it and delete. And now it's gone. It's not gone, it's still there under more. Never to worry. There's that. Now, does the number... No, adding things to the toolbar never changes the shortcuts. You can change the shortcuts. You can always go to Edit, Preferences, Shortcuts, and change the duration. Duration. I just typed duration in here, and so here's all the shortcuts for note duration. Like here, if I want to change... Like some people would rather, instead of the shortcuts being arranged kind of logically, where 4, 5, 6 is eighth, quarter, half, they'd rather 4 mean quarter note, 8 mean eighth note. That makes sense everywhere except in England, right? Because in England, quarter note isn't a thing, it's crotchet. But also, I don't like that idea because then things aren't adjacent that need to be adjacent, like eighths and quarters aren't adjacent, and I don't know how to handle things like 32nd notes or 64th notes or 16th notes. But in any case, if you prefer having some other set of shortcuts for your duration, this is where you would go to customize it. Edit, Preferences, Shortcuts. So, I talked about adding a palette, and there's one thing I didn't actually do. I actually added that entire text element. I used Shift, Control, Drag to drag it into the palette, and that added that entire text element. So now I can just click Arrest and click that thing. Well, what if I want to do that with like one of those letters? Like, what if I want the word cafe? C-A-F, and I want that E with an accent mark. Well, I know if I press F2, under Common Symbols, there is that E. So I can click it, and now there's my word cafe. Well, what if I just want that E to be easier to access than that? I can drag that E directly from here into my palette. Can't I? I thought I could. Maybe I have to click out of there. I don't know. I'm a little trial and error here. I have done this before. All right, so maybe I have to have not just added it to my score. More trial and error. I just got out of there, and I'm going to try it again. This time it looked like it was getting ready to add it, and then it stopped. So what went on? Why? There. Yeah, so I don't know. It's a little temperamental, but I dragged it enough times, found the right spot to release, and now it's there. So when I do that, now I can add that character anywhere I'm adding text. So what's another word that has that in it? The soccer guy, Pele. Is that how you spell his name? Well, I'm showing my ignorance, but in any case, that's how you can easily add text characters also. So, set of symbols for scale degrees. You mean like with the little hats on them? So, for whatever reason, the Unicode standard, who's in control of stuff like that, didn't think that was worth having. I think that's kind of silly because that seems like it should be. What there is, and it doesn't work that well, but I'll show you what there is. I'm going to enter some text here, and I'm going to put the number 1, and then I'm going to bring up that special characters palette. I'm going to come to Unicode symbols, and then I'm going to go to combining diacritical marks. And you'll see there's nothing in here because this font doesn't have them. Edwin font doesn't have them. You have to switch to a font that has them. Furthermore, you want to switch to a font that has them that works well. And there's not many that do. Very few fonts seem like they were designed to make this work right. I can't remember which ones. I think Garamond is one that I've had decent success with. So let's find out. I'm going to switch to Garamond font, and then I'm going to come back. I got to leave here and get back into it to be sure. I'm going to go back to that dialog, and now when I click on combining diacritic marks, I hope it's not Garamond. What the heck was it? There's some font that I've used that actually does pretty well. Maybe it's... Yeah, I just can't even remember which one it is, to be honest. I know it's not free serif. I wish it was free serif because we all have that. It comes with MuseScore. But watch what happens if I use free serif. Again, I need to actually leave the text box and get back into it in order for the change to kind of register. But now combining diacritical marks is full of all these markings. And it does have a caret. So when I add it, look what happened. You get this overlap because it didn't realize how tall the one is and how to position the caret underneath it. Free serif was not designed for that well. Some fonts are, most are not. I think it's a flaw in Unicode or a flaw in how font designers decided to use these combining marks. They didn't put in the right information so that the caret knew to appear above that one. So in any case, there is no standard character, and MuseScore depends on standards. We use Unicode code for ordinary things like numbers and punctuation. We use a standard called Smoofle for specific music characters, but this isn't a music thing. Carets and numbers are common. So Smoofle says it's not my job to define it, and Unicode says, yeah, I can't be bothered to make that work, or the font designers say they can't be bothered to make it work. So we're kind of stuck with not a great solution to that. I personally work around it by saying, you know what, I just don't use the carets. I find them a little ugly. I just say scale degree 1, and then after that say 2, 3, 4, and everyone knows what I mean. It's almost never ambiguous. If I put a number somewhere in one of my handouts, like this one doesn't have any opportunity for me to use numbers, but probably some other ones do. Harmonic Language here almost certainly does. When I say in modes that contain a whole step below the final, it's often raised in cadences to produce a leading tone effect 7 to 1. Is there any doubt that I meant scale degree 7, scale degree 1, as opposed to any other number 7 or 1? No, not really. So I typically, if there's any doubt, I just put the word scale degree there. So I just decided it's just not worth not worth my time to try to make that work any better. What I want to show you next are, I've actually showed you most of the things that we can do, but I want to show you some of the things about when I said preferences, the GUI preferences. So I mentioned the GUI components. When you go to create a new workspace, GUI components is one of the checkboxes. That's how it remembers. For instance, if I go to view and open the timeline, it's going to remember. Boy, my light timer is just really short today. the timeline is now going to be remembered. So if I now leave and go back to the basic workspace, the timeline will go away. And when I come back to my workspace, I have my timeline back. So yeah, that's what GUI Components does. It causes it to remember that. If you don't check that box, I'm not saying you can't open the timeline. I'm saying it'll do that globally. It won't think of that as just something for this workspace. So the same is true of what I said of the GUI Preferences. So that was the GUI Components. GUI Preferences are things like if I go to Edit, Preferences, and on the General tab, you'll see I can do things like change my font size from 9 to 11. I can go to the Canvas thing and change the background color to yellow, gold, etc. So, miscellaneous other settings in here. There's probably a couple things on advanced that qualify also. So let's see what that did. When I make those changes, I now have bigger text for my menus and my palettes, and the area behind my score is now that lovely shade of gold, whatever we want to call that color. And when I go back to the basic workspace, it's all back to normal. My fonts are back to normal, my color's back to normal. Those changes were only part of my new workspace. So there's a lot of customizations you can do here. What I want to do now is show you actually my own. I showed you my presentation workspace. I want to show you a couple others that I've created. So one is, well, actually the main one that I work is this one called Editing. This editing workspace is, I spend most of my time here. My editing workspace has in it, it's based on the advanced workspace because, again, like I said, I started using MuseScore long before it was possible to customize more easily. At some point, I should clean this thing up because I got way more articulations than I need. So yeah, I should totally think about cleaning all that business up. I just haven't bothered because now I'm coming back to Colleen's thing about scrolling. Frankly, when I'm in my editing workspace, I often do not need any of these palettes because I have put all the things that I use on a regular basis. Oh yeah, I turned on that single palette mode. Let me turn that off again. I have put most of the symbols I need in these two palettes. When I say most of the symbols, I mean most of the symbols that I need when I'm designing these worksheets. Because no, I'm not, these worksheets for teaching music theory, for teaching counterpoint and so forth, I don't need things like dynamics. I don't need articulations. I need different kinds of text, symbols, and I need all of these kinds of things. And spacers and double bars and things like that. Those are the symbols I need on a regular basis. This guy right here, this is an invisible breath mark. I added that to my workspace just yesterday so that this will happen. So what happened there? It's because when I turn on display of invisible items, you'll see there's an invisible breath mark at the end of that measure. It's actually a caesura, a short caesura it's called. But I added it from the breaths and pauses palette. So when I did that, it gave me that pause at the end of that scale. So when I hit the play button on this, it'll play each scale kind of separately. And yet you can do that with section breaks, but not, you can't have, if I tried putting a section break and I have that here on that layout palette, if I do that, it makes it be a line unto itself also. You can't have a section break that doesn't also start a new line, and I wanted to be able to have two scales on the same line. So have using this and setting it invisible, now I can apply that really easily. I can just pick a measure and then click this thing. And well, I think you have to click a note. You click the last note of the measure, then click that, and now you've got an invisible whatchamacallit, an invisible breath marking there. So this is my main palette. The rest of my main workspace. Everything else here I've customized barely, if at all. At one point, I went and I made an effort to customize it more, but I got tired of my main workspace being so different from the advanced workspace, because if I want to do demos for MuseScore, I want to remember where things are. I have enough trouble remembering things. So I decided to keep most things more or less in their standard places, but just give myself two special palettes where the stuff that I use all the time in creating my worksheets would be easily available. Oh, my audio went weird. Sorry about that. Yeah, I don't know what happened there. Sorry, no idea. But is it working? Let me just reselect my audio to be sure. So if there was an issue with my audio, hopefully that fixed it. But I don't know. So can colors be described with transparency? You mean in the background color? I don't know. I have no idea. Let's find out. Edit, preferences, canvas, color. Yep, right there, alpha channel. So this dialog here is operating system dependent, so that it will look familiar to you if you've used color pickers on your system. This is the Linux version, so people who are used to this particular version of Linux, this will be the same color picker that other applications see. If you're on Windows, you should hopefully see a Windows-specific color picker. On Mac, you should see a Mac-specific one. So how you set the transparency is going to look different on different systems. But yeah, it does look like you can set different transparencies there. So just for grins, let's see if I do set it to 20. Oh, let's not change mine. Let me go to my my new workspace. Okay, so let's go to my new workspace and go to preferences, and let's take our same lovely color but set it to be only semi-opaque. Oh, and that's what it looks like in the dialog. And is that what it looks like in real life? We'll find out. Yep, that is what it looked like in real life too. Now, there's nothing to show through it, so it's not really going to be transparent in any meaningful way, but it does make the color lighter for what it's worth. Okay, so these are the things that I wanted to show you. And realistically, you can kind of set up things as you want. I also set up, and if you go to my community, so let me actually go to my actual community site. Sorry, got to the wrong place. And on my community site, under Educational Partnership, Resources, hello. Wow. Okay. So you'll see Music Education Extension. This is something you can download. You download the file, and then you just drag and drop it directly onto MuseScore from your file browser into MuseScore. And apparently my system is freaking out right now because that link took forever to process. But in any case, you download the file, and from whatever your file, File Explorer on Windows or Finder on Mac, Files app on my Chromebook here, you just drag it from there to MuseScore, and it will install this extension that comes with two workspaces. And this is the file here. The two workspaces, one of them is called Music Education, which I set up, like when you saw that annotations palette that I created, that or some version of that is in my where did I put it? I guess I put it down here. Some version of that, a much more limited version of it, is here in that extension because I've gradually added to it. And to be honest, I've forgotten how to update that extension. The tools for creating extensions are not documented. They're not publicly. They are available. It's open source, but it's not documented, and I've totally forgotten the process for updating them. So it's kind of a pain for me to update that extension now. So as a result, it's out of date. I've added all sorts of stuff to my personal annotations palette, but whatever, it gives you the idea. I also, just for grins, give you a function theory palette in case your music education world involves that type of analysis, and Kodai hand signs in case you're working with ear training kinds of things where having these Kodai hand signs for solfege syllables might be useful to you. So that's all part of the music education workspace. I also, just for grins, created a young musicians workspace. Oh no, I'm back to a black screen. Crap. Am I really on a? No, I'm not on a black screen. I should be good. It looks like I'm good to me. So I'm not sure. But yeah, it's not a black screen. Um, my background went black though. Oh, that's because I changed workspaces. So my young musicians workspace. What did I do here? Well, I went to like Comic Sans or Sans or however you want to say it as my font. Apparently not very big. I should have picked a bigger one. So, and maybe I actually customized it. I can't remember. If I go to Edit Preferences. Or it could just be that I created this on a different system and the font sizes don't match. That could well be. So let me go with a bigger font here, just so you can see, this the way I really meant it. My young musicians thing is designed to look kid friendly. I don't know that it really does, but it's more to prove a point that you can do this. So in this version of things, I've got the piano keyboard open, and I've got nice big kid friendly font here. I simplified my toolbar. I took off the 30-second notes even, and etc. So that's my young musicians workspace that's part of that extension. So those are a couple extensions that you can access if you want to grab that. I mean, those are a couple workspaces you can access if you want to grab that extension. So everything I'm talking about is in my course. My course is called Complete for a reason. There's I don't think a single feature of MuseScore that I don't talk about. The only one that's not really dealt with in any depth is real-time MIDI input, because I don't have the hardware to pull that off in a way I would need to, nor do I have the expertise in it, nor do I actually particularly recommend it. But it's called Complete Online Course because every other feature is in there. And so the other thing is, it's there and it's concise. When you see me in these cafes, these aren't scripted, and I'm like flipping around, I'm answering questions, I'm dealing with things, and it's all one take, right? This is live. So basically what you just saw me take an hour to explain is packed into like one 10 or 15 minute lesson where I just show things boom, 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 boom. So it's much more efficient in the online course. It really, if you want to learn MuseScore, if you really want to learn it, I cannot recommend my course highly enough. It is so inexpensive for what it is. It's a no-brainer. If you value your time at all, then you will, the time you save by learning MuseScore from the course will have paid for itself the next day. It's just a no-brainer, really. Anyhow, end of commercial, and I've now showed what I want to show, so I'm going to go back to my own Cafe Workspace, which is the one that I created just for this cafe, not for today's episode, but for the cafe in general, because this allows me to sort of play with it every week and then just reset it every week. So usually when you're seeing these cafes, this is the workspace that I'm actually in. It remembers, by the way, which palettes I had open. So I think at this point, I have a couple questions I want to try to answer here. All right, so if you aren't seeing the Add Pallets button on the toolbar, it's probably because you've turned on the search. So all you got to do is X out of the search box and come back to the Add Pallets. So for chord analysis, not sure what you mean for by that. What do I use? I use my brain. I don't know. So I don't use a plugin to analyze my chords for me, if that's what you mean. If what you mean is how to put in Roman numeral analysis, that's built into MuseScore. Like here, here's some Roman numeral analysis there. That's just built into MuseScore. Add text Roman numeral analysis. And you just do that and type in your things. You type in BV116 and it automatically formats it like this. It's very smart. So, anyhow, there's that. All right, so next week is going to be the first week of the month, so it's going to be our Ask Me Anything session. So by all means, think about your thorniest questions, and if you got particular scores you want to need to share with me, you can go ahead and upload them anytime between now and next week. I'll put out a call for that later, but if you want to upload them to the cafe discussion, go back to the community and go to the conversation area, and that would be a good place to post any scores that I might need to be able to access to be able to answer your question about it next week. So I'll put that in here. Typo. Oh, okay. What else was I going to tell you? So next week, that's going to be going on there. I will also tell you that unless things go horribly awry, I will be launching my Counterpoint course next week. Most of you have heard me talk about that. I've mentioned it several times during the Cafe series. I talk about it a ton in Music Masterclass and in just in the community in general. It's epic. I mean, it is the most comprehensive thing that you've ever probably encountered to learn counterpoint start to finish. Know that there are more advanced courses, but they don't start at the beginning. This one starts at the beginning and gives you really in-depth. I'm so excited by this course, and I hope you will be as excited to take it as I was to create it. So next week, you're just going to be hearing a ton about that. So please bear with me and try to share in my excitement, and I look forward to talking about that some next time. So that said, let's return to my cafe theme and hear some music in a second here, because I got to turn the volume down so you can still hear me talk. So thanks everyone again for being here. I'm Marc Sabatella with Mastering MuseScore, and this has been the MuseScore Café. We've learned all about workspaces, the different ways you can customize how things are laid out, and really, be creative. And if you want something that's on the left to be on the right instead, oh yeah, you can totally do that. I didn't even show that. You can move the palette over to the right. You can make it be free floating. Tons of stuff that you can do to customize things. And if you do that in a workspace and check those 3 boxes that I talked about checking, it remembers it all. So check out my online courses. It helps support what I do here, and it helps you be much more productive in creating music with MuseScore. So until next time, I hope everyone has a great week. And for those of you who check out the masterclass tomorrow, we've got this wonderful piano piece that I'm going to be taking a look at and kind of analyzing and giving feedback on. So I will see everyone next time I see you. Goodbye.